Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parivajikacharya, Ashtottara Sri Srimad, the Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parivajikacharya, Ashtottara Sri Srimad, Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, text 16, right? Yeah. All right. Just give me a second here. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam deving saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudidayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 25th day of November 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 7, The Science of God, Chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings, text number 16. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutas tat kamalobhena dhavato arteheya dishaha santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. What does it say? What does he have, an N there? He doesn't put the verticals in until the end. He forgot that vertical on the end. It's an H. So just remember that, okay? Artehiya. Yeah, without the A. Dhavator tehiya. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator tehiya dishaha. You see what they do? Perfect. Okay. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. Ladies. Santushtasya narihasya svatma ramasya yat sukham kutastat kamalobhena dhavator teheyadishaha. No? Okay. Santushtasya. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyone online?
Santushtasya nirihasya
Santushtasya narihasya
svatma ramasya yat sukham
svatma ramasya yat sukham
kutastat kamalobhena
kutastat kamalobhena
dhavator te haya dishaha.
Davato te yadisha. Santushtasya, of one who is fully satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Nudihasya, who does not endeavor for his livelihood. Swa, own. Atma aramasya, who is self-satisfied. Yat, that. Sukham, happiness. Kutaha, where. Tat, such happiness. Kamalobhena, impelled by lust and greed. Davataha, of one who is wandering here and there. Arta ihya, with a desire for accumulating wealth. Dishaha, in all directions. Translation. One who is content and satisfied and who links his activities with the Supreme Personality of Godhead residing in everyone's heart enjoys transcendental happiness without endeavoring for his livelihood. Where is such happiness for a materialistic man who is impelled by lust and greed and who therefore wanders in all directions with a desire to accumulate wealth? Responsively. One who is content and satisfied and who links his activities with the Supreme Personality of Godhead residing in everyone's heart enjoys transcendental happiness without endeavoring for his livelihood. Where is such happiness for a materialistic man who is impelled by lust and greed and who therefore wanders in all directions with a desire to accumulate wealth? Okay, there's no purport, so I'll read on. Sada santushta manasa sava shivamaya dishaha sharkara kantakadibhyo yato panat padakshibaham. For a person who has suitable shoes on his feet, there is no danger even when he walks on pebbles and thorns. For him, everything is auspicious. Similarly, for one who is always self-satisfied, there is no distress. Indeed, he feels happiness everywhere. No purport. Santushta kena varajan navarte tapivadina alpastya jaiva karpanyad grihapalayate janaha. My dear king, a self-satisfied person can be happy even with only drinking water. However, one who is driven by the senses, especially by the tongue and genitals, must accept the position of a household dog to satisfy his senses. Purport. According to the Shastras, a Brahmin or a cultured person in Krishna consciousness will not enter anyone's service to maintain body and soul together, and especially not for satisfaction of the senses. A true Brahmin is always satisfied. Even if he has nothing to eat, he can drink a little water and be satisfied. This is only a matter of practice. Unfortunately, however, no one is educated in how to be satisfied in self-realization. As explained above, a devotee is always satisfied because he feels the presence of the Supersoul within his heart and thinks of him 24 hours a day. That is real satisfaction. A devotee is never driven by the dictations of the tongue and genitals, and thus he is never victimized by the laws of material nature. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, in these three verses, a stark contrast is being drawn between the devotee, advanced devotee, who is satisfied always in Krishna consciousness, no matter the circumstances. This is practically inconceivable by material calculations. Because by material calculations, we're always looking for that greater satisfaction. Now, sometimes we put it off, and we'll go at great endeavor to get an education and work very hard and so forth, hoping that at the end of it all, we'll get a good job, a good position, and we'll be satisfied then, you see. But the fact is that material satisfaction, even if you achieve it, is very fleeting. It comes and it goes. Everyone knows that. You can be in a good position for a while, but time, inevitable time, will change that. And then you're in some danger or some disaster, one of the threefold miseries attacks, you know. And your whole mental construct of how you're going to be satisfied and happy in this world collapses, inevitably, for everybody. So those who are intelligent don't seek their pleasure in the temporary things. And that brings us back to my favorite verse. Yehi sangsparjita bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyandavantam konteya nateshu ramate buddhaha. The key word is the buddhaha there. That one who is intelligent doesn't take part in the pleasures that are due to the contact of the senses with the sense objects. And that includes the mind. Your senses can be completely inert, but your mind is very active in watching or hearing something. So, O son of Kunti, Krishna says, such pleasures are the source of all miseries, and they have a beginning and end, and therefore the wise do not delight in them. So this is a basic principle of Krishna consciousness. First of all, to begin to have faith that there is another source of pleasure besides this sense pleasure, whether gross or subtle. And that is why the Sankirtan movement is so important and is successful. Because even from your first encounter, if you're willing to take part in the chanting and the prasadam and you participate, there's going to be some kind of pleasure there. You don't know exactly what it is. Of course, you know, from the eating, of course, you think, but it's more than just eating some nice food. There's actually a spiritual component to it. But especially the Sankirtan, especially if you take part in the congregational chanting. Immediately Krishna is there. And as we heard in last night's talk, those who were there, he was referring to, but not actually quoting, the verse at the end of the series that begins with Savai Pungsang Paro Dharma. Near the end. There's 4 or 5 verses there, starting with Srinvatam Sakata Krishna, Punya Shabana Kirtanaha, Ridyantaksto Yabhadrani Vidunoti Suditsatam. Very important verse. That reservoir of pleasure, I remember we used to publish that and print it regularly. And by the way, something that Niranjana Prabhu didn't mention last night, and I felt a little uncomfortable mentioning it. When he joined, I was there in Brooklyn already. He joined a couple of months after I did. And there was book distribution was just starting to get going at that time. Some devotees came from LA to talk about book distribution and live with us. I remember Mula Prakriti came. I remember, wow, what a smile. She had this, and you can see one of the things is, Western dentistry where everything is straight. It's very, very ideal. Anyway, it turned out that she was known for her $1 million smile. Meaning that she would smile at the people and they would all, she did very successfully. She was a real pioneer in book distribution. So they came, and I think Gopa Vrindabal came also. He was also a leader in book distribution. And then they left, and book distribution started to take off in Brooklyn. And even I went out, on Saturdays. I didn't do very, very well on book distribution. I remember going into the subways, and I would make announcements and go around, and I did some pamphlets and did some books and did some Lakshmi. But I wasn't that very successful. But Naranta Babu was like, when he joined, he was really a star. And I remember he went out one day and came back, and he distributed several thousand reservoirs of pleasure on the subways. I don't know what his Lakshmi count was, but that was like a record that still stands, that he remembers that. So I, worked with proofreading and publishing that Reservoir of Pleasure, not the first one, but when we reprinted it. And I discovered that the main substance of that book, of that pamphlet, is a transcript of a lecture that Prabhupada gave on that verse, Srinvatam Sukata Krishna, which is the one that he was talking about yesterday, although only he chanted the Sanskrit. So there's the last 5 verses are kind of the climax of the series of verses. And the basic point is that Sutta Goswami is explaining to the sages how one can practice Dharma and the soul can be fully satisfied. You see, if you Savaipung Sangparo Dharma Yato Bhakta Hokshaje Haitukya Pratiyata Yatma Supersedity. So that's Supreme Dharma. What is the Supreme Dharma? Now it's interesting, we had these different kinds of Adharma, right? Paradharma. Well, this is not Paradharma, it's Parodharma. You have to make the distinction. The Supreme Dharma is that which engenders devotional service for the transcendent Lord. That's the only name that's given, is that Hokshaja. And that name, as you go through Bhagavatam, you find that name comes up again and again when you're talking about just getting into bhakti. You see? It's not about Krishna Leela or anything like that. It's the basic quality of the Lord that why people don't get into bhakti, because they can't see him. They don't believe in him. Like in our super scientific, I told you a million times I was raised as a communist, as an atheist, where is the God? It's just like opiate of the people. It's just imagination, right? Because if your means of getting knowledge is conducted by the scientific method, which is the arohapanta, the ascending process, you gather information through your senses, which can be increased by the very wonderful atomic microscopes, electron microscopes, and the incredible telescopes they have. It's still the same senses, but you're able to expand your input. So, and then from there you make an idea, theory. Oh, this is how the universe looks, how it must have been created, and you write the books and you get famous that way. And similarly on the micro level also. And nowhere in all of that, vast amplification of the senses you're going to find the soul or God. He's not visible in that way, and therefore he said hokshaja, akshaja, knowledge which is born or generated by the senses. It's symbolized by aksha. Aksha means eyes, but it can mean all the senses. He is adha. He pushes it down. In other words, he's transcendental to it. This is the definition of transcendence. You cannot perceive it or understand with your material senses and mind. So, but if you just, happen to come into a kirtan and you take part a little bit, you're contacting the Lord in his sound form. Right? This is one of our main foundations of our faith. Is that what is it? Namachintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purnakshudha Nityamukto Abhinat Namanamina. Right? Yeah, that's the verse I'm looking for. Thanks. So the holy name is just like a Chintamani gem. Why? Because you contact it and it will change your consciousness. It'll transform you. A Chintamani gem transforms what it touches. So that Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, the very form of all the different rasas, the spiritual rasas you can experience through there. Purnak is complete, it's completely pure, nitya, always liberated. And why? Abhinat Namanamino. Because there's no separation between the name and the named. The name and the named are identical, which is completely inconceivable to the material mind. But that's a fact, and it's because of that fact that the Lord Chaitanya's movement is so successful. Because you take part in it because it's nice music, it's ecstatic, whatever it may be, you're exposed to it, even just hearing, what to speak of actually chanting. And it will plant something in your mind, even subliminally, that this is something I haven't experienced before. There's a pleasure here. There's something going on. Let me pursue it. So Prabhupada begins that talk on that as Narendra pointed out, the holy name, the name of Krishna is so wonderful or so beautiful or something like that. I forget the quote, but he talks about the holy name at the beginning. So the idea is that those verses start with that. So when Krishna understands, he's in the heart. Shinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Ridyan Saksoya Badani Vidunoti Suditsatam. Krishna's in everyone's heart. When you're hearing about him sincerely and you're hearing from the right source, then he responds. He reciprocates by cleansing away the unwanted things in your heart. The blockages to devotional service. The blockages to your experiencing and appreciating devotional service. which is great. And then the next verse, which is the one we chant before every class, and many others do. Nashta prayesha badreshu, when these abhadras are not completely cleansed away, but Prabhupada says some maybe 70%, 60%, you know, prayena means mostly. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevya. By serving the Bhagavatam. How? By hearing and repeating it. You're serving the Bhagavatam now, you know, by hearing Prabhupada's wonderful translation commentary, and by serving the person Bhagavat. Those two things. In other words, you can't make any advancement unless you come under the influence and ultimately surrender to a pure devotee, who is and you know, this word was misused for years, but it's exactly that, channeling. Probably use the phrase transparent via medium. So via, the via is, you know, when we printed it, we leave the via out. Transparent medium means that he's a pure devotee. He's not, there's no obstruction, there's no personal, you know, motive certainly, and no personal interpretation like that. So both, serving the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavat. And what could be a better service? You can serve both the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavat by listening to Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. You're listening to his words, you see, so it's ideal. This class is so important. So what happens then? Bhagavad Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. So as you proceed, then your bhakti becomes irrevocable. In other words, you've reached the state of nishta. And that state of nishta is there in that wonderful 2 verses of Rupa Goswami, the ladder from faith to love. So it's interesting because it begins with Shraddha. Right? Nishta is very firm faith, but the first stage is preliminary faith. Adhau Shraddha. And Prabhupada said it's respect. The kind of faith that makes you curious to want to come and visit the temple, you know, and be with the devotees. That's the key. So Adhau Shraddha Tataksaro Sangha. That leads you into the association of devotees. Now in this age, there can be through so many media. Ideally, it's personally. Everything is personal. But even without that, through the internet, through the books, of course, you're also associating. That association is there. So the key to association is how much you can hear without too much interference. That's that famous shushu shro, which Prabhupada defined as submissive oral reception, which is very descriptive, or just ardent hearing. You're listening with great attention because it's interesting and it's meaningful to you. So that's the essence of successful association. So, so Rupa Goswami describes that brings you into the association, and after some time, because you're getting association with Krishna through his devotees, you want to, you know, you're open to participating and open to chanting. You know, Adau Shadata Sadasang Bhajana Kriya, which begins with the chanting, you know, individually and collectively. And then you pursue that, and if things are going nicely, you come to the point you really want to be initiated, because, you know, that's a very important step. You take vows, you become connected to the parampara, the channel becomes clearer for you to produce, and you see those around you who become initiated and they're making progress, and why can't I do that also? You know. So the point is, Krishna is attracting you. That's what he does. He attracts you with, of course, his name, his qualities, his pastimes, and his instructions, and his devotees. All of this is more and more ways of becoming attracted to Krishna. And the more you're actually attracted and you do service, practical service, you can feel the spiritual bliss. You're not going to feel it, you know, in all of its purity and great force, but you feel something. And the proof of it is you're becoming less interested in all your old karmi stuff, right? Especially all those horrible sinful activities that, you know, you can't even think of doing them anymore. So so this goes on like that. Srinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyantaksto Yabhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. So Vidunoti is this cleansing. It's the same thing as Chaitodharpana Marjanam. It's all a lot about badras, which is dirt. You know, this dirt is preventing us from seeing ourselves or you know, being receptive. You know, all of this dirt. But if we somehow or other take up the hearing and chanting, even if we're just not doing it 100% sincerely, we're just taking an experiment, whatever it may be, Krishna responds. And then, if you're fortunate, you get onto this ladder. And then you're this in the Nartanivriti stage with your bhajan, how serious you're with your bhajan, with your surrender, with your commitment. And then the anartas are proportionally cleansed away more and more until you come to the nishta state. Now the nishta state, which is described in that verse, naishtiki, same word, is what Lord Chaitanya defined actual faith to be. And it's important that we know that definition. Shraddha Shabde. Shabde is a Bengali idiom that means is defined as, is heard to be understood. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudridhanishtoy Krishna Bhakti Korle Sarva Karma Kritahoy. You'll find this quoted in a purport in the Bhagavad Gita, I forget which verse. So, Shraddha, this is now firm faith, Nishta, is defined in the following way. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe, a very firm determination and understanding that just by practicing Krishna consciousness, all the do's and the don'ts of Krishna consciousness, the sadhana bhakti, all of my aspirations will be fulfilled for happiness, for life, for everything. You see, that's a big faith because you're not now, but you can see around you other devotees, you read about them who went through this transformation, and you can get enthused to do that. So the more that you're able to associate with serious devotees and hear and participate in service, then you rapidly come to the point of, whew, glad I got out of that entanglement in the material world. Now I'm confident that I'm on the right path, you see. So as it goes on, he goes on and he says that at that point, when you have irrevocable, devotional service, it means that you're not going to quit. Your faith is very strong. Tada, tada rajas tamo bhava, kama lobhadayashche, cheta unabhidam stitam sattve prasidati. Very, very clear verse. So at that time, the lower modes of nature, rajas and tamas, passion and ignorance, no longer affect you. And their concomitants, lust and greed, kama, lobha, and etc. Cheta eta unavidham. Your cheta, your consciousness, is not affected by them because you're firmly fixed in the mode of goodness, or even Vasudeva, pure goodness. You're tasting that. Stitam sattve prasidati, and you become fixed in goodness and prasidati. You become more and more naturally pleased. Why not? Krishna is with you at all times through all of our millions of births, right? But we haven't been able to contact him. What's the analogy with the two birds in the tree? And there's billions of trees, the little insects or a little giant tree and everything. Is that the soul is completely absorbed outside in the externals. He's forgotten all about his friend. And he's getting some pleasure, but he concomitant sufferings, the threefold misery, birth, death, old age, and disease. So that's why the first step, oftentimes in Prabhupada, when he would speak, many, many times to newcomers or people like that, he would emphasize the existential or ontological position of every soul, which is that we're embodied. The body is, yes, it's a vehicle for these temporary pleasures, but it's also a vehicle for tremendous suffering. Old age, disease, and death, and we forget about birth. Very, very. It wasn't a happy situation in the womb, getting born. So we have to realize that, and you can't really argue about it. It's certainly true that every one of us is going to go through the period where our nice, strong youth and health fades. If we're not necessarily, you can die young also, but the point is that whatever situation you're in, even if it's a very happy and satisfied one, it's temporary. And it's going to be faced with so much suffering, and ultimately you'll have to leave everything. The more attachments you have, the more miserable is your death. If you're not attached to anything in this world, well, that part of death is not, a problem because you're not attached to it. But it only works if you're attached to Krishna. And if you're attached to Krishna, then death is like, it's often welcome, all this suffering body, enough, But if you're really thinking of Krishna, you're surrounded by devotees, it's welcomed. I remember with our old friend Radhanath Das. He was here, and I knew him in Miami when his disease was first starting to manifest. It was some kind of neurological thing, made it difficult for him to walk. Eventually, when he came here, he was permanently in a chair that he had to be moved for him. He couldn't even move it. But he was so determined to distribute books. He would go out, with his aide to a parking lot somewhere, and he would see people, and he would, he's attracting attention just by his condition, and he would say, "Here, take this book, it would be good for you." And with his smile at them, and a lot of people would take the books. Amazing, sacrifice he made. This is how Balaram and his mother became devotees. They met him in a parking lot, Walmart or something, and he gave him a small book, and they read it, and I remember when he left, he was in the hospital, hooked up to a breathing machine, and Rajendrananda, bless his soul, he would spend hours with him every day, talking to him and encouraging him like that. It was a very saintly soul. And I would visit. I didn't have the time to stay so many hours. But then there came a point where the doctors said, "Well, you're stabilized now, and we can let you go home, but you don't have to die. You don't have to die. But you have to stay hooked up to this breathing machine. That would have been the end of his Sankirtan, obviously. So he refused. Said, "Forget that. I'm ready to go out." So I think he called me up, and he said, "We want to do it on Wednesday." No, we want to do it on Friday. And so I'm not going to be here on Friday. I'm going to Alatra. Those were the days when I used to travel to Alatra twice a year. So he said, "How about Thursday?" "Yeah, Thursday's good." So he's like, so he told everybody, and there was a big crowd in his room. He was well known, and I remember Rohini, that's Balaram's mother. She used to live here for years, and she was there, and we were chanting, and she went up to him and thanked him so much for giving him that book. It was very moving to see, because that started their whole life. So he was very, he was just calm. He was just lying there. And the kirtan was going, and eventually you could see the different screens, and eventually it was flat, and he was gone. But he made that decision. He wasn't attached. What to be attached to here? The only thing he was staying for was the Sankirtan. He wouldn't be able to do that anymore. So. And we've had other, successful departures. Oftentimes they ask me to come to sing, and so I've done at least 6 or 8 of them, and they're very moving. Here's devotees, and they're surrounded by people who, their family, and they love them and so forth. But it's you always get this feeling that it's not the same, because I worked in a hospital, as I told you, I think, many times, and I saw so many people die, and it was really depressing. For the most part, they'd be sedated. Hare Krishna, welcome. Which is the worst thing. Devotees never want to be sedated. You want to be fully conscious at that time, so you can remember Krishna. But it's just, and it's just, they don't know what's going on, and it's very, very bad. So this is talking about how one can come to the point of relishing within one's heart, within one's mind, transcendental pleasure at all times. Just the opposite of material pleasure, which is by nature fleeting and very frustrating. And the worst thing is, why is it the source of all misery? Well, not necessarily because you'll overdo it and you'll eat too much and it'll be miserable. That's another way it can be miserable. But the main way is that it keeps you attached to this world. Whenever you enjoy something with the senses, it plants a seed in your heart to do it again. You see? And that's your subtle body. The subtle body doesn't die when you die, when the gross body dies. And it's that subtle body, means your mind and intelligence, which contains all these memories and these desire seeds, that is going to take you to your next body. Now, also your karma, of course. So that's, you may not be a human body. But the point is that that's 2 ways in which material sense gratification can bring misery. One is by, and it happens all the time, doing too much of it. This is why obesity is an epidemic, not in the United States. Because these guys who engineer the food and make it addictive, what is it that corn syrup, right? And so many things, so that people they just they all get fat, which itself is a misery. But the point is that you have so many different material desires, and you die with that, and that brings you to another body, and it could easily be a subhuman body. What happened to all that enjoyment? It turned into the worst misery. It was a big trick. It's Maya's trick. That's her assignment, to try to keep the soul bewildered by this enticement for material pleasure. You see, that's her duty. Now, on the other side, Krishna is always trying to get us back by coming sometimes, occasionally, sending his devotees, pure devotees to teach, leaving the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. Vyasa is also an incarnation of Krishna. It's also by Krishna. So Krishna is making the effort, but if we're stubborn and we want to keep forgetting him, then we can do that. So here he's saying, one who is content and satisfied because he links his activities with the Supreme Lord, residing in everyone's heart, that person enjoys transcendental happiness without endeavoring for his livelihood. Now this is something that's very radical, but it works. I mean, Prabhupada, he didn't spend any time when he came trying to get money so he could buy food. Yes, he had to. But how did he was getting money to pay the rent and everything? Was with selling the books. So it was all service. That was his real motive. And Krishna was providing people and things and apartment and Lakshmi, whatever he needed. So that's the complete surrender. That's the fully surrendered souls. That's one of the principles of surrender. You remember that? There's 6 of them. There's Sharanagati. So smart. What is it? Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya bharjanam. First 2 are for anything. If you want to do anything, you got to do that. Is that you accept the things that are favorable, even though they may be a little painful, and you give up the things that are unfavorable, even though that may be painful. And sometimes the second is even more painful. I got to give up those things, just like, what was that fellow he tells a story about Prabhupada's godbrother meeting one of the lords in England. I forget his name now, if anyone can remember. What is it? Maybe, yeah, Jetland. And they knew something about India. They'd occupied, and so he said, "Can you make me a Brahmin?" I said, "Sure. Just give up these 4 things: no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling." So what did he say? Impossible. Impossible. And Prabhupada said, yes, because that's their very life. That's all they know. But the devotee says, okay, I mean, it may be difficult, but I've been chanting 2 rounds, and when I chant those 2 rounds, I become very enlivened, and I'm able to, continue with my life, but also I become more and more attracted to Krishna. You can feel it. So you come to the point where you're ready to do that. And so those first 2 are, you can't go, if you're not ready to do those 2, you can't do any more. In other words, these are in the order of necessity. So accepting the favorable, giving up the unfavorable, 4 regular principles like that. Particularly Bhajan, Rakshishatiti Vishvaso, Gopta Devadanang Tata, to have full faith that Krishna will protect. You read the Krishna book, right? What happens, right? It's amazing, Vrindavan Leela, the series of demons come, right? Or remember after Kaliya, one of my favorite pastimes. So Kaliya was a demon, but he became, delivered because of the prayers of his wives. But anyway, so he was attacking Krishna, and Krishna of course danced on, and all of the residents were on the shore. Mother Yashoda, they were fainting because there's this delicate little Krishna in this huge multi-hooded dragon, that was, and Krishna is a goner for sure. And so he let that go on for, what was it, 2 hours or something, And then until everyone was on the point of death. This is in the Krishna book. And then he breaks out, and then he starts dancing, this all miraculous thing. And he chastises Kaliya, right, to come out. Ultimately, and so that what happened is then after all of that it took hours, and they were all on the shore. Said, well, all right, we'll camp out on the shore, So you remember what happened? A big fire. a very eventful time, day and night. So a big forest fire is coming and threatening everyone's life, So what did they do? Did they run away? Did they dive into the lake? So this is we'll be safe here. No. Krishna, all we had, please save us, So this is Rakshishyatiti Vishvaso, meaning complete confidence that Krishna will protect. And I can't resist. Now, last night I met some old friends who I hadn't seen in a long time, Anuttama, and of course Narantu is an old friend. He comes periodically. And he lives in Potomac. Anuttama is centered there. That's where what they call PR and the outside world was centered from Mukunda Maharaj, and that's a place. It's right near Washington D.C. So he's been there for many, many years. So I happened to visit there 4 or 5 years ago in 2018. There was a BBT meeting there, and I went there, and it lasted a few days. And I met my old friend Sharaba. Some of you may remember Sharaba. And Sharaba is an amazing devotee. I don't want to go through it. It may take too long to tell his whole story. But he was, I think, in Serbia, and he became interested in Krishna consciousness. And there were temples at that time, not in Serbia, but in Croatia, which is right next door. So he by that time he had, I think he joined the army and then came out, and then he wanted to join a temple. By that time, it was the early 90s, and there was a war going on. I don't know if you know the war there. When Yugoslavia broke apart, you probably know very well, there was Serbia fighting Bosnia and Croatia. I forget all the things, but it went on for years. And they told him, you can't go anywhere. There were no temples where he was, but there was a temple in Croatia where Mahatattva was. Eventually. He comes into it. So he wanted to go there, but he said, you can't go anywhere. It's a war. It's too dangerous. But he had, he was surrendered, Rakshishyatiti Vishvaso, so he's confident Krishna will protect, And he also knew this mantra. This is a famous one. Mare Krishna Rakeke. Rake Krishna Mareke. Very important. If Krishna wants to kill you, no one can protect you, like Hiranyakashipu, And if Krishna wants to protect you, no one can kill you. So he had full faith in that. And he's chanting constantly. So he had his backpack on with his change of clothes, nothing hard in there. And he started walking toward Croatia. So before long, he gets to a point where there's bombs going over his head, and it's nighttime, and he sees the whole village burning and everything, and it's pretty heavy duty. And then he comes to a little barn that's on fire, and there's a cow and a calf, and they're crying, and he's upset about that. And then he hears click, click, and it's some guys with rifles, And one of them fires the rifle, misses him, and he takes off running. And they're coming after him and shooting, but he's chanting. They don't injure him. Somehow he missed. This is the first miracle. He was uninjured. He ran for 15 minutes. Whew. So he's out of that. So he walks, and eventually he comes to a place, and one guy says, "Stop! Who are you?" And he hears click, click again. Okay, so he stops. "Who are you?" He said, "I'm a spirit soul, pilgrim." "Yeah, but are you Serbian? Are you Croatian?" or something like that. So anyway, the two guys are threatening him, and then a third one comes, and he's kind of in charge, of the little platoon or whatever it is. So get on the ground, face the ground, So he gets on the ground. He's got a little backpack there, And they got asking him and yelling at him, and he's not giving the satisfactory answers. So the guy pulls the trigger at point blank range. Somehow or other, this is the miracle number 2, and this is a big one. It doesn't hit him. It hit his backpack, but there's nothing in there to deflect it. It's just like old clothes or something. It misses him. It misses him this way. It hits a rock and goes right by the ear of one of the other soldiers, and they start freaking out and getting on the case of the guy who shot them. So they were a little bit, taken aback by that. So they put him into a cell for the night, and and so they started interrogating him. And he told them who his aunt was, and this and that, and So anyway, it was more or less satisfactory. So they said left him in the cell. But another guy came, one of the groups, and he had a big knife, And he said, "Well, I don't know. Some of the names you named, they were Serbian names, I don't know. I think I'm gonna take care of you, So Sarabha pulled out a picture of Krishna. It was probably the one where Krishna's sitting on a rock in the forest, and there's a little deer there, and everything. So the guy suddenly is softened, because they were also religious. And Sarabha said, "This is God." He says, "Oh, she's so beautiful." He couldn't do this. But the point was, he was disarmed. So after that, he said, "Okay, Hare Krishna." He didn't say Hare Krishna, but so that was another miracle. So then the next day, the other two guys, they by this time they liked him. So, all right, we're going to take you to Croatia, but there's a lot of checkpoints on the way, and your papers aren't very good because the picture of you doesn't look like you anymore because it doesn't have any hair, So he said, "Well, what can I do?" So he's sitting in the back seat of the car, and the two guys are in the front, and they come to the first checkpoint, and they stop the car, and the other two guys, they have their papers, and okay. But all Sarabha was doing is chanting in the back seat. So the guy looks his way, but doesn't see him. This happened with David Mutaswamy too in East Germany. I don't know if you know that story. That's another one. But somehow, and so he waves him through. And the two guys in the front say, "How did that happen? That's amazing." And the second checkpoint, they don't even stop the car. They just go right through. So by this time, the guys in the front are saying, "Boy, this is magic. This guy must be..." They get all the way to a few miles from Croatia, and they let him off and say, I don't know if they said Hare Krishna, but they, good luck. So he's there in a little town, and he's hungry, so he gets some fruit, and he's offering it in a park. You've got a little picture, it's on a bench, he's offering, and two cops come. And they're standing nearby, and Sarabha, by this time, he's flying high. So he says, "Do you mind? I'm making an offering now. I'll talk to you in a minute, okay?" So they very politely waited. He must have had an aura by this time. And so after that, they want to see his papers. So they show them the papers. So this doesn't look like you. So we'll send you back we're sending you back to the city you came from, where he first started. So Sarabha said, "Oh, Krishna, really? After all of this, well, if that's what you want, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna." So they leave him off at the last checkpoint, and they give the guy strict instructions that on the next car that goes back, you have to put him in there, So Sarabha's waiting there, and he's got all his fruit. So he had his breakfast. So he offers the fruit to the guy, the guard there, some of the fruit, prasadam. He said, "Oh," he took it, so he started eating it, So somehow it changed his heart. So he said, "I'm not going to send you back. You can go on," So he went out to Croatia, and it turned out there was a house there, just on the border, I think, before Croatia, that some of his relatives lived. And so he was able to take shelter there, and they were able to get his papers for Croatia, so they can go in there and be. So we were able to get to the temple in Croatia. He joined up there, and eventually, this is another long story I won't have to tell, but that temple and some other temples in Europe, because of there was a leadership problem, and so he came with Mahatattva to L.A. and he landed there and he's had various adventures. But he's nicely situated in Washington, does puja and everything. So, and the story, if you want the story, it was written down. Mahatattva did some work on it, and I did some editing. I can send it to you. It's really amazing, But it's faith building for all of us. Is that if you if you really surrender, and Prabhupada's own story is the same thing. At full faith, Rakshashiti, Krishna will protect, Krishna will provide. That's what we're talking about here. All I have to do is to just sincerely serve at every moment, and everything will be provided. And that was shown in Sarabha's case, but even more in spades in Prabhupada's case. He was able to get shelter in Pennsylvania, and then when he went to New York with that yogi, and somehow they learned about it, brought him down to the Lower East Side, and the rest is history, But that's what's being described here. But the key is, and I'll just end here, is that as you advance and you learn to relish the holy name, you realize that source of happiness is always there for you, because Krishna is always there. You can always chant, you can always hear, remembering, even if you can't chant, that may come a time. But the remembrance is there, and that remembrance itself will give you a sense of bliss and happiness, and all of us will face at the time of death. You can't even, utter anything. But if we're fortunate, we'll be surrounded by devotees. We'll be able to hear the holy name, and we'll be successful. So that's what we were hearing about here, about how one can get to the point where Krishna consciousness itself is so satisfying that you hardly feel the need for anything else, just the bare necessities. And we see it with the Goswamis and the great devotees. So we should be serious, to try to get to that point where we're so satisfied with chanting Hare Krishna, we have such a taste that it's fully satisfying. That's the difference between Krishna consciousness, spiritual happiness, and the so-called material happiness, which is really a cheating. It ultimately is self-defeating to engage in it. All right, I'll leave it there. I'm sorry I went way over time. And if there's no time for discussion. Vijay, you there?
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, how may I serve you?
You have any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So, thank you, Dravida Prabhu, you're most kind, and about pranams. Do you mind reading again the synonym, the first synonym, the Sanskrit and the English translation?
Okay, now which is it? Which verse? Because I read a bunch of...
The first verse
Oh, 16. Okay, the synonym for what?
Sorry?
What, do you want the synonym for a certain word in the verse?
The first synonym.
Oh, santushtasya. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Santushtasya, of one who is fully satisfied in Krishna consciousness.
Yes, that is the synonym. Thank you very much. You're most kind. So based on this synonym, my question is, if one who is fully satisfied in Krishna consciousness
Yes.
does not endeavor for his livelihood, and he does not wander here and there with a desire for accumulating wealth, my question is, what does he do the whole day? In other words, does he stay put like a statue like observing and including to that and adding to that, does he add to that the observance of the vow of Mauna, for example?
Well, you may recall that a few chapters back, we learned about the Python man. You remember that? The behavior of the perfect person,
Yes.
So he wasn't traveling preaching, he was just lying there. But he was fully realized. And when Prahlad Maharaj came, then he was able to have this wonderful conversation. So it's interesting, the very title of the chapter, the perfect person. But that's not what we're supposed to do. The whole idea is that we belong to a sampradaya, which starts with Lord Chaitanya. It starts with Brahma, but Brahma Madhva Gaudiya is sampradaya. And there is so much to do, not for our own maintenance for everything, but for preaching, for spreading Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada, he was a perfect example. He came to America with virtually nothing, and every time he got a chance, he preached. He gave even some little office room he had, and someone came by, he would preach for hours. And he got little donations, and he had his books. He was able to keep body and soul together, obviously. And eventually Krishna showered everything upon him. So our duty in our sampradaya, because we always have to remember that we have to be in tune with our acharyas, and then we can get the benefit. So I remember joining Brooklyn, and it's not like we're thinking, well, what about my maintenance? Well, of course, we're all young. Everyone's young. You could get along with little. But we had a place to sleep. There was plenty to eat. Nice prasadam, and we had really good company, and everyone was satisfied. You weren't thinking about that. Now, for those who entered the Grihastha ashram, there's often, even at that time, they were Grihasthas, but they were all part of the press, and they were also maintained. But there may come a time you need your own place, you're going to raise children and so forth. So there has to be a way of making money. And oftentimes devotees, they start business. Like we had a business, the incense business, the spiritual sky incense, and devotees would do that, sell that, and they would be allowed to keep a portion for their apartment or whatever, and in this way support the movement. So the whole idea is that first comes your spiritual responsibilities, your sadhana, your chanting and so forth, and then comes your willingness to sacrifice to please the authorities. And in our line, the authorities are always thinking, how can we expand the movement? How can we preach? And there's so much to do with that. So the livelihood comes as a natural, in a natural course, if one is fully engaged in these endeavors for preaching, starting a farm community, and that's also a big preaching. So the whole idea is that that's not at the top of your scale of what needs to be worried about, is your maintenance. You trust that Krishna will provide something and that you'll be able to keep body and soul together and maintain. And it's shown that it works, that he does that. And the responsible leaders are, they make arrangements so that the devotees are able to keep body and soul together and maintain, at the same time do their services. So that's how I understand this works. Okay?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. I thought I was thinking someone's coming? Yes. Okay. Oh, I have a